Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today we're going to go over how to paint the Catachan Jungle Fighters. These guys are pretty cool. They are every 80s action movie distilled into a single figure. And while this guy here is one of the old metal figures, everything I'm going to show you will work perfectly well for the plastics as well. I just happen to have this guy, and frankly I really like the old metals too. You can pick them up not too difficult on eBay, or just do a plastic army, it's up to you. Now to begin with, I've actually given him a spray of Xandri dust, same as if I was going to paint a Cadian. Reason being is all of the other paints we're going to use are going to cover really well over this. You could start from, say, a light grey or something, but like always, this is how I'm going to do it, so I'll show you using this technique. Now the colours we're going to use are pretty simple. We've got here our Cadian flesh tone, and that's where we're going to start, because the skin being such a large part of the Catachans, you can make a lot of mess if you don't do this step first. We're then going to use Warg flesh for his trousers. Now, if you want a darker green, I know a lot of people like a dark green, almost black, then Caliban green would be a good replacement for this, but I like a slightly lighter one, and Warg flesh is what I'm going to use. We'll do a few camo stripes on him. We're going to do the whole tiger stripe look, and Mornfang brown is what we're going to use on his trousers for that, before we finish off his vest with Death Guard green. Any of the red details, Mephisto on red, funnily enough. Then I've got Lead Belcher here for all the metal details, Rhinox hide for some of the leather stuff and his equipment, and then we'll give him an all-over Agrax Earthshade. Now, like always, I'm going to use Celestra Grey, I'll just pop that out there, ta-da, as the base coat for any white details, and there'll just be a couple of those later, and you can use whichever black you like when we come to those bits. In particular, I do recommend the old Vallejo black, just because of the coverage, but you can use a Baden black if you happen to have that handy. So, let's get started. Now this first step is one where you can actually be fairly messy, because anywhere that we sort of go over the next area, it's not going to matter. We are going to paint everywhere that's adjacent to the skin. So get yourself a small base brush, and just a little bit of water in the Cadian flesh tone, and we'll start covering over this. You will probably need to do a second coat, but just take your time, go around. Now, in particular, you'll find, like along muscle groups and stuff like that, you want to spend a couple of seconds just making sure that you get up close to wherever the edge of the vest or the jacket that he might be wearing is, okay? Now you can see I haven't been terribly careful with where that skin ended up. All over his vest, some on his gun, it doesn't really matter though. So now I've got my Warg flesh. I'm going to get in just a little bit of water as always and start covering in his trousers. Now if your, small base brush holds a decent point, you can do these quite easily with that, but I'm using my medium layer brush just because I like a little bit more control. I don't want to cover over too much. Whichever the case though, this is a really easy step. All you're doing is just blocking in this green, okay? So cruise around now. And with Warg flesh over Xandri dust, you may find you can get away with one coat, but I'll leave that for you to decide. Now, unsurprisingly, I didn't get away with just doing the one coat. I did come back and do a second over the top, with a wee bit of Mornfang brown on a smaller brush, so like a detail brush or a small layer brush. You just want to start painting little S shapes. Okay, just little squigglies like this. Fairly random positions. And don't worry if you kind of go off the trousers at some point. You're just going to do a few of these until you're happy that your boy looks like he's got proper camouflage. Okay, so take your time, go around, do a few of these, tiger stripes, and just that S shape is a nice easy way to get them on there. Okay? Now, personally, this whole camo thing isn't something I tend to do on my guys. I like them to just have simple, green trousers, but you may find this is a nice, easy way to get a little bit of variety in your troops. It takes a little bit of extra work, but, it's up to you. That would be how I would do it if I was going to do this across a whole army. Whatever the case, though, let's quickly bop onto our Death Guard green, and we're going to start doing his vest. You can probably tell I'm mucking around with the camera and the lighting too. It gets a little bit more difficult when it comes into summer, and I've actually got natural light to fight with. So I've got my Death Guard green, and we'll just start polishing in his vest. You will probably need, by which I mean definitely, 2 thin coats of this to make it work. And then with that out of the way, we can move on to our Mephiston Red. Now, most of your models are going to have just the bandana, and the plastic ones tend to have just a little bandana around the head. They don't normally have these big full bandanas. So anywhere that you want to be red, obviously. So you got a medic or something too. Get in there now with a little bit of Mephiston Red. And let's finish that off. Then with our red finished in, we get our Rhinox hideout and start filling in all of his leather equipment. So his knife scabbard, his belt, any of these little equipment pouches. Now you will find that despite being as dark as it is, this tends to need a second thin coat over the top just to make sure it's got a nice even coverage. So go around now, any old leather details you want to do in, off you go. So now with the Rhinox hide done, depending on which angle you look at your model, he's almost finished. What I'm going to do now is skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to do the black and the metal on him off camera because honestly, we do those in so many videos, and black and metal bits, you guys know that stuff by now. What I'm going to do then is come back once I've finished those, and I'll show you a couple of spots you can put on some Celestra Grey. And, just as a note, if you want to be really fancy, you can do his belt loops in Warg flesh. Now, with his boots blacked in, his gun almost finished, we're ready to rock and roll. I'm just going to do a couple of little white details. So, on most of the Catachan las guns, they'll have one of these little winged skulls, and just a quick blast of Celestra Grey. We'll get that ready for some white, and I'll do the one on his armband here too. Now once that's had a couple of minutes to dry, I've then gone over just a little bit of Retributor armor for this earring thing he's wearing, and on his back here, if you've got any that are wearing like really prominent swords, just a bit of Mournfang Brown on the grip there. That'll get that done. So now along comes the star of the show, as always, and get yourself a nice big brush. I'm going to use just a medium shade brush, but if you've got a bigger one, you are doing an all-over shade, so don't worry too much about having a brush that is too big. So, straight out of the pot, just start going around and working this all over the model, and making sure that it's getting into the recesses too, because we want it to help give us some shading. So like I said, it's over the whole model, and this will probably take about half an hour to dry. We'll come back and we'll see what we've got when it's finished. Now what a huge difference that makes. Just that wash, and suddenly all of those flat colors look a lot more interesting. Now we're not going to highlight everything. I'm actually going to skip over his trousers entirely because I quite like how they've come out as they are already, and trying to highlight them with that camo pattern on there will be a challenge. On top of which, if you've got 60 Imperial Guardsmen you've got to paint for your army, you're probably going to take a few shortcuts, and trousers is one good spot for that. What you want to pick is the focal points of a miniature, and on our Catachans is obviously going to be his skin. So I've got my Cadian flesh tone, and what I'm going to do is just quickly blat over some areas, the high points of his muscles, where I just want to smooth things out a little again, and make it look not quite so rough. This will have the added advantage that it's really quick and easy to do, and it will help make them look a little less dirty overall. Now there's plenty more we can do after this stage with the skin, but we'll get to that when we do. Just going to quickly pick out some areas and leave that nice deep shading in the recesses. So here on his arm's a really good spot. If we have a look at this big chunky bit here, paint to about there, and then we'll do the other side. You see, nice and simple. Now, this can be quite quick because you don't have to go and be very precise with it, but if you want to, you can. So I'm going to finish that off now. We'll come back and see how his skin looks when that's finished. And you'll see how quickly that smooths out his skin again and lets us keep that depth. Okay, that's really easy to do. All it is just going back over the high points. But if you want to highlight a little bit further, you can get yourself some Kislev flesh, go to a smaller brush, and what we'll do is just pick out a couple of areas, like around the largest areas on his muscle groups. So let's pick his arm here, and we'll just paint along the sides of the muscles. This is a tricky one because you don't want to highlight the high points, you want to highlight the edges, which sounds crazy, but it's a little bit stylist. So his face is easier. We highlight that in the same way we always do. Just go for his nose, his chin, high points of his cheeks. Now, still on our small layer brush, get yourself some Evil Sun Scarlet, and I recommend being quite generous with this for your highlights on your red. Nice bold lines will really help this stand out. Just a little bit of Ulthuan Grey will help us fake our white. We don't want to go to pure white because that'll look really sharp, so we'll just lightly blend in a little bit of that, and it looks white by comparison. Now, I tend to like using Doombull Brown for a really deep red leather effect, so that's what I'm going to do. And we'll just outline the shape of his blade here, and just do the edges of his pouches. This will dry quite a bit darker than it looks when it goes on, so feel free to be a little more generous with it than you'd think. And then we'll go to just a little bit of Nurgling Green, and just do along the edges of his vest. If you do want to make this look a little bit tidier, you can hit it with some Death Guard Green before this stage, but I like the kind of grungy look, so your mileage may vary. If you do decide to use that Death Guard Green, then do it in the same way that you did with the skin. Just highlight those high points again, leave your shading in the recesses, and then do this Nurgling Green over the top. Then you can move on to highlighting your metal and your black areas, and for that I'm going to use Stormhost Silver and Dawnstone, same as always. So just a little bit of Dawnstone along the edges of the weapon, and then just a little bit of Stormhost Silver for those metal bits. With those final couple of highlights, our Catachan is complete, ready to take the fight to the enemies of the Emperor, up close and personal style. And as you can see, this is pretty simple. It's not quite as quick as doing the Acadians, for example, because you can't rely on dry brushing in quite the same way, but here's a quick thing worth pointing out. If you doubt that this would work on the plastic Catachans, well, here's one lurking here that I've done in the same way. Now, I did, in actual fact, do his trousers differently, as you can see, but the basics of the technique here were all the same, and while he's not fantastic, I think I messed up his skin a little bit compared to the other fella, but you can see how this would work across an army. So, here's our fella again, what we did today, and, I'm pretty pleased with how he's turned out. Tucked in with 80 or so other buddies, he'll look fine. Now, I haven't touched in his boots because when I go ahead to base these guys, I tend to do quite a lot of sort of green stuff, tufts and grass and what have you, which will obscure those, so I don't see a lot of point in mucking around with that. So let's quickly skip ahead and see what it looks like with his base on. And there he is at last, ready to rock. With his base on, he looks the business. I'm really pleased with how he turned out. And like I said, this will work perfectly well with those plastic ranges as well. Okay, so just something to bear in mind. So hopefully something was useful to you there, guys. As always, you can get in touch, either drop a comment in the old box below, or my Facebook and Twitter are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.